The wooden loom stands against the limestone wall, its warp threads taut and weighted with clay stones. This is Nazareth, year 30 AD, and the fabric being woven will clothe a carpenter who walks dusty roads, spreading teachings that will change the world. Standing in Mary's courtyard workspace, this is where clothing actually originates, not purchased from markets or produced in workshops, but created thread by thread in the household by women whose hands never stop moving, the process taking months from raw fleece to finished garment. The spinning never ceases. Even while walking to the well, talking with neighbors, watching children, the drop spindle is always in hand, twisting raw wool fibers into thread, the motion being so automatic that conversation continues without interrupting the work. Waking means immediately resuming yesterday's spinning, the pile of carded wool sitting ready, the spindle weighted with a clay whirl, the right hand dropping and spinning while the left feeds fibers, the rhythm becoming meditation, hours passing while thread accumulates. Sheep shearing happened 2 months ago. The entire village cooperating to shear flocks, the greasy, unwashed fleece being distributed to families, each household receiving wool based on the number of sheep they own or work they contributed, the raw material being community resource. Washing the fleece is brutal work, heating water over fire, soaking the wool repeatedly, squeezing out the lanolin and dirt, spreading it to dry in the sun, the smell being overwhelming, the grease coating hands and making them soft despite the rough labor. Carding aligns the fibers, using wooden paddles embedded with thistle heads or metal teeth if wealthy, pulling the wool between the cards until fibers run parallel, the prepared wool being fluffy and ready to spin. This step taking days for enough wool to make one garment. The drop spindle is deceptively simple, a wooden shaft through a clay whirl, the weight providing momentum, the spinner dropping it while feeding wool, catching it before it hits ground, winding the thread, repeating thousands of times until calluses form and muscles memorize the motion. Different weights of thread for different purposes. Thick, sturdy yarn for outer garments that must endure weather and work. Finer thread for undergarments against skin. The spinner controlling thickness by how much fiber is fed. The skill being developed over decades starting in childhood. Natural wool colors range from white to brown to black. No dyeing being necessary for everyday clothes. The varied shades creating subtle patterns when woven. Intentional color requiring expensive dyes that most families cannot afford regularly. If seeking authentic details about how Jesus and his contemporaries actually dressed, subscribe and we'll continue exploring the labor behind every thread. The spinning for one simple tunic takes weeks. Working every spare moment, a woman can produce perhaps 400 yards of thread weekly, a basic garment requiring over 2,000 yards, the math meaning months of work before weaving even begins. Children learn by watching and helping. Girls as young as 5 practicing with the spindle, boys learning to card wool, everyone contributing to the household textile production, clothing being too valuable and labor-intensive to waste on anything except collective effort. Thread is wealth, carefully stored, counted, protected from moisture and insects, sometimes used in barter when coins are scarce, a woman's spinning ability directly affecting her family's economic security and her value in marriage negotiations. Winter work happens mostly indoors, sitting near the hearth fire, the cave portion of the house being warmer than the courtyard. Multiple women often working together, spinning being social time, gossip and teaching happening simultaneously with production. The loom waits for enough thread. Before weaving can start, sufficient warp threads must be spun and prepared, the delay being frustrating but unavoidable, patience being as essential as skill, rushing producing inferior fabric that won't endure the hard use it will receive. Setting up the loom is a major undertaking. The warp threads must be measured to identical length, attached to the top beam, weighted at the bottom with stones or clay donuts, the tension being critical. Mistakes meaning starting over completely. The loom stands upright against the wall, 6 feet tall, the warp hanging vertically, the weaver standing to work rather than sitting. The position allowing better control and leverage, though causing back and shoulder pain after hours of repetitive motion. Calculating thread needs is complex. The garment's size, the desired tightness of weave, the thread thickness all affecting how much is needed. experienced weavers knowing from decades of practice, errors meaning wasted work or insufficient fabric. Weaving begins with the bottom edge, the shuttle carrying weft thread, passing back and forth between alternating warp threads, each pass being beaten down with a wooden sword to create tight fabric, the rhythm becoming hypnotic, the work progressing slowly but steadily. The fabric grows upward inch by inch, a good weaver producing perhaps 3 inches daily, a full tunic taking weeks even after all the thread is prepared, the total time from fleece to garment being 3 to 4 months of nearly constant work. Striped patterns are created intentionally, changing weft thread color every few inches, using the natural wool colors to create simple designs, the stripes being decorative and also making repairs easier by showing where different sections join. Narrow fabric requires joining. The loom produces cloth perhaps 18 inches wide, garments requiring 2 or more panels sewn together, the seams being structural necessity, not decorative choice, every stitch being done by hand with bone or bronze needles. The tunic Jesus wears is seamless according to Scripture. This is significant because it means woven in one piece on a specialized loom, requiring exceptional skill, the garment being valuable enough that soldiers gambled for it rather than tearing it into shares. Weaving flax for linen is different from wool, requiring different technique, different loom setup, producing fabric that's cooler and finer but more labor-intensive, linen being more expensive than wool, reserved for special garments or wealthy families. Linen production starts with harvesting flax plants, pulling them from the ground to preserve fiber length, retting them in water to rot away the woody parts, drying and beating them to separate fibers, combing to align them before spinning begins. The tighter the weave, the better the fabric. Closely packed threads resist wind and water, provide warmth, last longer under hard use, but require more thread and more time, the quality being directly proportional to labor invested. Colors come from expensive dyes, purple from murex shells being famously costly, blue from indigo, red from madder root, yellow from saffron, the vibrant colors marking wealth and status. Most people wearing undyed natural fibers their entire lives. Tekelet blue is religiously significant. The tzitzit fringes on prayer shawls requiring one blue thread, the dye being so expensive that most people substitute white, the blue being commanded but economically impossible for the working class. Repairs happen constantly. Fabric too valuable to discard when damaged, patches being sewn over worn areas, holes being carefully darned, garments being passed down through family members, worn until literally falling apart, then repurposed as rags or padding. The fabric represents hundreds of hours. When Jesus speaks of moths destroying clothes or not worrying about what to wear, his audience understanding the labor behind every garment, the teaching hitting harder, knowing the investment each piece represents. The basic tunic is the foundation garment, a long rectangular piece with a hole for the head, worn by everyone regardless of wealth, the differences being in fabric, quality, color, and decoration, the shape remaining essentially identical across all social classes. Leave your like if this detailed look at ancient clothing production is revealing the labor that modern people never consider when reading biblical texts. Construction is surprisingly simple. 2 panels of fabric sewn together at the shoulders and partially down the sides, leaving openings for arms and lower body. No complex patterns or fitted pieces. Simplicity making production feasible for home weavers with basic skills. The tunic reaches to the knees for men, allowing freedom of movement for work, longer versions being impractical for physical labor, the length being practical choice, not fashion statement, walking and working in long robes being difficult and dangerous. Women's tunics extend to ankles, modesty and social expectations requiring more coverage, the additional fabric representing more work and more expense, gender differences in clothing being practical and cultural simultaneously. Sleeves are minimal or absent. Some tunics having short sleeves, others being sleeveless. Full-length sleeves being rare and indicating wealth because they require more fabric and more complex construction, the simple versions being easier to produce and more comfortable in heat. The outer garment is a rectangular cloak, woven as one large piece, wrapped around the body and over one shoulder, secured with a pin or brooch, providing warmth at night and weather protection, also serving as blanket, bag, or bundling cloth when needed. This cloak is the garment that cannot be kept as collateral overnight. Mosaic law requiring its return before sunset because the poor use it as bedding. The law acknowledging that many people own only one outer garment, losing it meaning exposure to night cold. Belts are essential functional items, long strips of cloth wrapped multiple times around the waist, holding the tunic close to the body for work, creating pockets by tucking items into the folds. Girding your loins, meaning pulling the tunic up through the belt for freedom of movement. Footwear is simple leather sandals, straps holding a flat sole to the foot, made by local leather workers, expensive enough that many people go barefoot most of the time. Sandals being saved for long journeys or special occasions. Head coverings protect from sun, men wearing cloth-wrapped turban style, women wearing veils that cover hair and sometimes faces, the practice being cultural expectation and sun protection combined, bare heads being unusual and slightly improper in public. Undergarments exist, but are minimal. A simple loincloth being standard, providing basic modesty and comfort. The concept of multiple layers of specialized underclothes being completely foreign. Simplicity being necessity when every piece requires months of work. Washing clothes is infrequent, water being scarce and hauling it being hard work. Most washing happening only when garments are visibly soiled or smell unbearable. The natural oils in wool providing some self-cleaning properties, frequent washing being impractical and unnecessary. Fuller's soap is used for heavy cleaning, a mixture of lye and other alkaline substances, harsh on fabric and hands, used only when necessary. The Fullers being specialists with their own workshops, their craft being mentioned in scripture because it's familiar to everyone. Clothing colors fade quickly, exposure to sun and washing removing dyes, garments becoming paler with age, the fading being accepted as normal, only the wealthy being able to maintain vibrant colors through repeated re-dyeing. Storage is careful and deliberate. Folded garments placed in wooden chests, sometimes with herbs to discourage moths and insects, the chest being among the most valuable household items, protecting the family's significant investment in textiles. Special garments mark religious observance, the tallit or prayer shawl with its required tzitzit fringes, the phylacteries worn during prayer, these items being carefully constructed according to religious law, the production requiring knowledge of specific requirements. Share in the comments. Could you have created your own clothing from raw fleece, investing months of labor into each garment, or would the commitment have been overwhelming? The tzitzit fringes are commanded in Torah, each corner of the prayer shawl requiring twisted cords with specific numbers of winds and knots, ideally including one blue thread, though most people using white only, the fringes serving as physical reminder of commandments. Wedding garments are the finest a family can produce, months or even years of preparation using the best wool or linen, incorporating whatever dyes can be afforded, the garment being saved and treasured afterward, possibly the only truly decorative clothing a person owns. Mourning involves tearing garments, ripping the outer clothing being visible expression of grief, the damage being real and costly, the practice showing the depth of loss by destroying something valuable, the torn garment being worn throughout mourning period. Priestly garments are elaborately specified, the high priest's robes requiring specific colors, materials, and construction, the production being specialized work, the garments being so valuable they're stored in the temple, worn only for sacred service. White linen signifies purity, priests wearing white, the wealthy wearing white for special occasions, the color being difficult to maintain, requiring frequent washing and replacement, the symbolism working precisely because white is impractical and expensive. Patches are visible and accepted. No stigma attaching to repaired clothes, everyone wearing patched garments, only the wealthy having enough clothes to discard damaged ones. The parable of new wine in old wineskins or new patches on old garments resonating because everyone understands the incompatibility. The seamless tunic is extraordinary, mentioned specifically in John's Gospel because it's unusual and valuable, most garments being assembled from pieces, the seamless construction requiring exceptional skill and time, explaining why soldiers wanted it intact rather than divided. Travelers carry minimal clothing, Jesus sending disciples out with only the tunic they're wearing, no spare clothes. this being radical simplicity, even by ancient standards, the instruction demonstrating complete dependence on hospitality. Giving away your cloak is significant sacrifice. Jesus teaching to give cloak as well as tunic if sued. This meaning giving literally everything, leaving yourself naked, the teaching being deliberately extreme to make its point about generosity and non-resistance. Clothing indicates social status, fine fabrics, bright colors, elaborate decoration, all signaling wealth, while most people wearing simple undyed garments immediately identifying them as working class, the visual markers being impossible to hide. Borrowed clothes for special occasions, weddings, religious festivals, formal occasions, sometimes requiring better garments than daily wear, families borrowing from neighbors, the practice being common and expected, community resources being shared when needed. Children's clothes are hand-me-downs, garments passing from older to younger siblings, being let out or taken in as needed, worn until completely unusable, then repurposed into patches or rags, nothing being wasted. Climate requires seasonal adjustment, lighter fabrics for summer heat, layering for cold nights, the cloak being essential for sleeping warmth, weather protection being crucial when shelter is minimal and heating is expensive. Professional garment makers exist in cities, fullers, dyers, specialized weavers producing fine cloth for the wealthy, but most rural families producing their own textiles, buying professional services only for special items or repairs beyond household skills. Stand in Mary's workspace as the loom holds partially completed fabric, understanding that every thread in Jesus' tunic represents hours of labor, patience transformed into protection against elements. This wasn't fashion, it was survival infrastructure. Clothing being essential protection, its production consuming enormous time and resources, families measuring wealth partially in accumulated textiles, garments being significant economic assets. The investment makes biblical teachings sharper. Instructions not to worry about clothing hitting harder when the audience knows what goes into each piece. The moths and rust-destroying treasures being real economic threats, not metaphors. Simplicity was necessity, not choice. Most people owning perhaps 2 tunics, 1 cloak, 1 pair of sandals, minimal undergarments, the capsule wardrobe being enforced by economic reality, variety being impossible when each item requires months to create. Women's textile work was economically crucial, the Proverbs 31 woman being praised for spinning and weaving because this skill directly determines family survival, her work clothing the household and producing trade goods, the labor being essential, not decorative. The purple dye trade was enormous business, Lydia in Acts being a purple merchant indicating significant wealth, the dye coming from thousands of murex shells, the process being labor-intensive and expensive, the color being reserved for royalty and the extremely wealthy. Clothing laws maintained social order, sumptuary regulations restricting who could wear certain colors or fabrics, the rules being enforced through social pressure and occasional legal penalties, appearance being controlled to maintain hierarchy. Regional styles existed but were subtle. Palestinian Jews dressing differently from Greeks or Romans, the differences being in draping, fastening, head coverings, not radically different garments, cultural identity being maintained through small details. Jesus' clothing was typical working class, simple, undyed tunics, practical cloak, basic sandals, nothing marking him as different from other Galilean craftsmen. His teachings standing in contrast to ordinary appearance, the message being more radical than the messenger's clothing. The Transfiguration's white garments are supernatural, clothing becoming dazzling white being impossible through natural means, the description indicating divine glory, the audience knowing that such whiteness couldn't be achieved through human effort or bleaching. Textile production united women across classes, rich and poor women both spinning and weaving, though the wealthy using finer materials and having servants, the shared knowledge creating common ground, the skills being universal female experience. Modern clothing abundance obscures ancient reality. Closets full of garments versus owning 2 tunics, cheap fast fashion versus months of labor per item, the shift being so complete that historical clothing economics are difficult to comprehend. Children inherited textile skills, daughters learning from mothers in unbroken chains stretching back generations, the knowledge being preserved orally and through practice, written instructions being unnecessary when everyone learns by watching and doing. The labor made people careful, treating garments gently, repairing immediately, storing properly, the investment being too significant to be careless, modern disposable attitudes toward clothing being incomprehensible to people who made their own. Which aspect of ancient daily life should be explored next? How houses were actually built in first-century Galilee, or how meals were prepared and eaten? Leave your vote below. I'm Abigail. You've stood in the workspace where Jesus' clothes were made, witnessed the months of labor in every garment, understood that the seamless tunic was remarkable precisely because most clothes were pieced together from precious fabric. Welcome to the circle, where history reveals that even the Holy Family wore handmade garments requiring extraordinary effort, that biblical references to clothing carry economic weight modern readers miss, and sometimes the ordinary required months of patient work.